In the last video I spoke about the Native American folklore creature known as the Skinwalker, an evil shapeshifter. And this week I wanted to discuss another infamous creature from Native American legend, known as the Wendigo. You may have heard of the Wendigo. It's been covered in film, television, and literature. The Wendigo originally comes from Algonquin folklore, but it's known amongst many other tribes, such as the Cree in Ojibwe. It is mainly based in the north woods of Minnesota, the forests of the Great Lake region, in the central regions and northern forests in the east coast of Canada. The Wendigo is known as the flesh eater of the forest. This creature is said to be a supernatural being that is associated with malevolence, cannibalism, murder, and insatiable greed, as well as the north, coldness, famine, and starvation. It is referred to as an evil spirit that devours mankind. According to Algonquin legend, the creature is a giant as tall as a tree, with a heart of ice. Its body is skeletal and deformed, void of lips and toes. Other tribes have elaborated its features, noting that it has jagged teeth behind its lipless mouth, and would make hissing sounds when taking breath, and its feet leaves a trail of bloody footprints. The Wendigo feasts on men, women, and children that come across its territory, and that fate is considered to be lucky, as the Wendigo would sometimes choose to possess the person instead, making the possessed person become a Wendigo, and then forcing the person to hunt down their loved ones and feast upon their flesh. Native American legends claim that the Wendigo was once human, but became the creature through magic. The legend states that becoming a Wendigo is a punishment for engaging in dishonorable or taboo activities, such as cannibalism to survive. Cannibalism as a means of survival occurred quite a few times when Native Americans and colonizers found themselves stranded in the bitter cold ice and snow of the woods. The legend also states that the humans who act upon extreme gluttony, greed, and excess are vulnerable to becoming possessed by a Wendigo. Because of this, the Wendigo lends its name to a controversial medical term known as Wendigo psychosis. It has been described by psychiatrists as a cultural bound syndrome, its symptoms being fear of becoming a cannibal and an intense craving for human flesh. Environmental destruction and insatiable greed are also seen as manifestations of Wendigo psychosis in some Native communities. Wendigo psychosis is said to develop in winter and around the regions the Wendigo is said to stalk. In this way, the Wendigo also became a tool to explain mental illness and serious afflictions of the mind. But fear of the Wendigo has also served to define moral social behavior and to encourage moderation and cooperation. The Wendigo has also adapted and changed to our modern time, with some Native communities interpreting the creature as a manifestation of the excess of capitalism and colonialism. But despite the idea of the Wendigo being merely a way of defining moral code, there have been several documents of incidents of people turning into a Wendigo and devouring human flesh. Attempts to get rid of the Wendigo come in the form of native healers, and in past instances, if the attempts failed, and if the possessed person began to act viciously towards those around them, they were ultimately executed. One of the oldest instances of this is dated in 1661 in a Jesuit relations document. The document stated the following: "What caused us greater concern was the intelligence that met us upon entering the lake, namely that the men deputed by our conductor for the purpose of summoning the nations to the North Sea, and inciting them a rendezvous, where they were to await our coming, had met their death the previous winter in a very strange manner. Those poor men, according to the report given us, were seized with an ailment unknown to us, but not very unusual among the people we were seeking. They are afflicted with neither lunacy, hypochondria, nor frenzy, but have a combination of all these species of disease, which affects their imaginations and causes them a more than canine hunger. This makes them so ravenous for human flesh that they pounce upon women, children, and even upon men, like veritable werewolves, and devour them ferociously, without being able to appease or glut their appetite. Ever seeking fresh prey, and the more greedily the more they eat. This ailment attacked our deputies, and as the death is the sole remedy among those simple people for checking such acts of murder, They were slain in order to stay the course of their madness. Another infamous story of Wendigo sightings comes from the 1900s, with a native Cree man known as Jack Fiddler, who was a shaman like his father and soon became famous for his alleged ability to conjure animals and protect people from spells. But the most notable thing he was capable of was being able to defeat the Wendigo. Jack Fiddler was the most famous of Wendigo hunters. He claimed to have defeated at least 14 Wendigos in his lifetime. Some Wendigos were sent against his people by enemy shamans, and others were members of his own who were taken with an insatiable and incurable desire to eat human flesh, in which case Fiddler was usually asked by family members to kill a very sick loved one before they turned to a Wendigo. In some cases, the Wendigo, him or herself, would ask to be euthanized according to the necessary rites. Fiddler's own brother Peter was killed after turning into a Wendigo when the food ran out on a trading expedition. Jack Fiddler's reputation grew, and soon he was approached multiple times by Cree ministers and missionaries to bring Christianity to his people, but he respectfully declined, and by the beginning of the 20th century, his people were the only ones to continue living traditionally without government imposition of religious or legal matters. But Canadian Mounties sought to introduce Canadian law in the north, and soon when they heard of Fiddler's power against the Wendigo, Fiddler's last murder resulted in his arrest at the age of 87. His other brother Joseph was arrested as well. Jack admitted that he was guilty of the crime, but to his defense, he stated that the woman was cursed by the spirit of the Wendigo and would eventually murder members of his tribe. Jack escaped captivity during a walk outside, but hung himself nearby and was found dead a day later. Jack's brother Joseph still went on to trial, and an eyewitness taken by the Canadian Mounties, named Agnes Ray, testified that the woman killed, who was the daughter-in-law of Joseph, was killed while in deep pain and incurably sick according to the custom of the people who were not aware of Canadian law. Ray admitted that it was a belief among his people and that Jack and Joseph were the ones who were usually asked to euthanize the very sick and prevent Wendigos. Despite some other unreliable testimony from Ray and the pleas of missionaries, Joseph was convicted and sentenced to death, and further appeals did secure his release, but they came too late 3 days later following his death. Although cases of Wendigo psychosis has greatly decreased in modern time, to this day sightings are still reported, and the idea that the Wendigo may be something more than a psychosis, a myth, or a mere metaphor, the idea that the Wendigo may be a spirit of evil that lurks the forest, is quite terrifying. If you like this video and want to see more, hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching and stay spooky everyone.